Malik stared at the blank canvas in front of him, his fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over his brushes. The familiar hum of the fluorescent lights above echoed in the quiet studio, but the noise didn't reach him. He had grown used to the silence that filled his small, cramped studio, where the only company he had was his art and his thoughts. The brushes he had gathered over the years were old now, their bristles worn and frayed. Yet they had served him faithfully, translating his wildest thoughts and deepest emotions onto canvas. But today was different. Today, Malik was struggling. The vibrant colors he usually wielded with such ease seemed to mock him. Every stroke he made felt wrong, as though the canvas was rejecting him, fighting him at every turn. It was the weight of the world, of years spent in the shadows, of rejection after rejection from art galleries and buyers, that weighed on him now. The art world wasn't kind to people like him, people who didn't fit into the box of what was considered acceptable art. A knock on the door startled him, and he quickly wiped his hands on his apron before walking over to answer it. Standing in the doorway was his older sister, Amina, her face weary but soft with concern. "You're still at it, huh?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. Malik sighed. "What else is there to do?" He stepped aside to let her in. Amina stepped into the studio, her eyes scanning the mess of half-finished paintings and discarded canvases. "Malik, I've told you, you can't keep working yourself into the ground like this. You've got to get out there, show people your work. You can't just hide away in here forever." Malik shook his head. "I've tried. I've gone to every gallery in the city. Every single one. They don't want me. They don't want my art." Amina walked over to one of the paintings, a stunning depiction of an abstract landscape full of swirling, vivid colors. The brushstrokes were raw, full of energy and life. "I don't understand," she said quietly, her voice filled with disbelief. "This is incredible, Malik. I can't believe they've turned you away." Malik let out a bitter laugh. "That's exactly why. It's too raw. Too different. It doesn't fit what they want. They only want what's safe, what's marketable, what's trendy. No one has the guts to embrace something new." Amina paused for a moment, contemplating his words. "You can't give up. You've got something special. I know it. The world is going to see it eventually." He didn't reply. What could he say? How many more years would it take? How many more gallery owners would he have to face, only to be rejected and belittled? He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep going. Amina gave him a long, searching look. "I want you to meet someone," she said suddenly. Malik raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "A friend of mine. He works in the art world, and he's connected to some of the biggest buyers and galleries around the city. He could help you get your work seen by the right people." Malik shook his head. "Amina, I'm not interested in jumping through more hoops. I've had enough of people promising me things they can't deliver." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Please, Malik. Just meet him. What's the harm? You have nothing to lose." Malik stared at her for a long time, torn between his frustration and his love for his sister. She always believed in him when no one else did. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe, for once, the world would see his art for what it truly was. "Fine," he said, exhaling deeply. "I'll meet him. But if this turns out to be another dead end, I swear I'm done." Amina smiled, a glint of hope in her eyes. I know. Just trust me on this one." The next day, Malik found himself walking into a sleek, modern art gallery in the heart of the city. The stark white walls and minimalist decor were intimidating, a far cry from the messy, colorful chaos of his own studio. He felt like an intruder in this polished world, a world that had never once made room for someone like him. He was greeted by a sharply dressed man in his mid-40s, whose slicked-back hair and sharp features radiated confidence. The man extended a hand, his grip firm but not overly enthusiastic. "Malik, I presume," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. That's me, Malik replied, shaking the man's hand. You must be Mr. Jacobs. Indeed. Amina has told me a lot about you, Mr. Jacobs said as he led Malik further into the gallery. She speaks very highly of your work. Malik gave a polite nod but remained guarded. Amina was always hopeful, always trying to connect him with people who might understand him. He wasn't sure what to expect from Mr. Jacobs. The gallery was filled with the usual collection of abstract paintings, modern sculptures, and experimental installations, works that seemed more concerned with style than substance. As Mr. Jacobs led him through the space, Malik couldn't help but feel out of place. The paintings on the walls were clinical, safe, and overly polished. There was nothing raw or emotional about them. So, Malik, Mr. Jacobs said, turning to him with an air of casual indifference. What exactly makes your art stand out? What is it that you're trying to say? Malik took a breath, trying to find the right words. My art is an expression of who I am. It's raw, unfiltered. It's my emotions, my struggles, my experiences, painted on canvas. I'm not trying to fit into any box. I'm just trying to tell my story. Mr. Jacobs raised an eyebrow. I see. Well, I'm sure that's very interesting. But as you know, Malik, the art world can be a very difficult place. We don't just take anyone off the street, you know? We have to think about the marketability of your work. The kind of buyers we cater to are looking for something a little more refined. Malik's stomach churned at the dismissive tone in Mr. Jacobs's voice. He had heard this before, countless times. Art was about who you knew, not what you could create. It wasn't about emotion or authenticity, it was about the market, about fitting into a mold. I understand, Malik said quietly, his voice tinged with frustration. Well, Malik, Mr. Jacobs continued, if you ever decide to refine your style a little more, I'm sure we could revisit this conversation. But for now, I'd say it's not quite what our gallery is looking for. Malik nodded stiffly, feeling the sting of rejection once again. Thank you for your time, he said, trying to mask the anger rising in his chest. As he walked out of the gallery, his mind raced. He had been so hopeful, so desperate to prove himself. But once again, he had been told that his work wasn't good enough. He clenched his fists as he stepped into the street, determined not to let the words of another man define him. Amina had been right, he had nothing to lose. But maybe, just maybe, there was still something more to gain. The world wasn't ready for his art, but he wasn't going to give up on it. Not yet. The battle wasn't over. Malik walked out of the gallery, feeling like a failure. The cold, unforgiving wind of the city rushed past him, but it did nothing to cool the fire of frustration that had ignited in his chest. He had tried to remain hopeful, he had tried to believe that this time might be different, but once again, he had been turned away. The words of Mr. Jacobs echoed in his mind, refine your style a little more. What did that even mean? Malik knew what it meant. It meant he wasn't good enough as he was, that his art, raw, authentic, and unpolished, wasn't what the world wanted. Amina had been so excited about this opportunity. She had believed that this connection might be the key to his breakthrough. But in the end, it was just another dead end. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself and kept walking, not even sure of where he was going. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out to see a message from Amina. How did it go? Was Mr. Jacobs interested? Malik let out a short, humorless laugh as he typed his reply, not at all. He said my work wasn't refined enough for his gallery. Same old story. He stared at the screen for a moment before putting the phone away. Amina was always so hopeful, so persistent in believing that Malik had something the world needed to see. But the world wasn't ready for his kind of art. It wasn't ready for something that didn't fit into its narrow, predefined notions of beauty and value. As he walked, the sound of his footsteps echoed in the empty streets. The city felt distant, cold. The people around him, rushing through their busy lives, seemed like strangers, unaware of the fight he was waging just to be seen, just to be heard. Malik's dreams felt like a burden now, something that had trapped him in an endless cycle of disappointment and rejection. When he finally made it back to his studio, he collapsed into the old chair by the canvas he had been working on earlier. The empty space of the studio seemed to reflect his own emptiness. He picked up a brush, dipping it into the vibrant paint, but the colors no longer felt as alive as they once did. He had given everything to his work, but the world just didn't seem to care. His soul, his heart, his pain, all of it was trapped on these canvases, waiting to be discovered. But what if that day never came? Malik's phone buzzed again, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was Amina again. Please don't give up. You've got something that nobody else has. I'm telling you, Malik, just trust me on this one. He stared at the message, torn between anger and a deep, aching sadness. He didn't want to let her down, but he didn't know how much more of this he could take. He had poured his heart and soul into his work, and yet, the art world had never once given him a chance. What was the point in continuing? What was the point of creating if no one saw the value in it? A deep sigh escaped his lips. He had tried to prove himself on his own terms, but it felt like the world had already decided that his art wasn't worth anything. And if his art wasn't worth anything, then who was he? A failure. A nobody. The weight of those thoughts pressed down on him as he looked at his paintings, beautiful, painful, raw, but ignored by the very world that should have been embracing them. He had worked so hard, and yet nothing ever seemed to change. As the evening wore on, Malik fell into a restless sleep, his mind swirling with doubts and frustrations. But in the quiet of the night, something shifted. A small spark of defiance flickered inside him. He didn't know where it came from, but it was there. Maybe the world wasn't ready for his art, but that didn't mean it would never be ready. Maybe he wasn't supposed to wait for the world to accept him. Maybe he was supposed to force the world to recognize him. The next morning, Malik woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He had to keep fighting. No matter how many rejections he faced, no matter how many doors were slammed in his face, he had to keep pushing forward. He wasn't going to let the art world, or anyone else, define his worth. He grabbed his phone and typed a quick message to Amina, "I'm not giving up. I'll find a way. I don't know how yet, but I will." A few moments later, her reply came through, "That's my brother. I believe in you." Malik put the phone down and walked over to his easel. The canvas was still blank, but for the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid to face it. He picked up his brush and began to paint, each stroke more confident than the last. He was creating not for validation, not for approval, but for himself. And that was enough. The next day. The morning after the gallery disaster, Malik sat down at his desk, the weight of disappointment still heavy in his chest but no longer suffocating him. There was a new fire in him, a quiet storm of determination that he couldn't ignore. He scrolled through his emails, looking for any signs of opportunity, anything that might offer a glimmer of hope. And then, he saw it. A message from an unknown sender. "We've been following your work and are very interested in showcasing your paintings in a private auction. We believe your art could sell for millions. Please contact us for further details." Malik's heart skipped a beat as he read the message again, then again. The words didn't seem real. Was this a scam? A trick? He quickly responded, asking for more information, and within the hour, he received a reply. This was no scam. The message was from a private art collector who had been quietly following Malik's work, gathering information about his paintings. The collector wanted to feature Malik's art in an exclusive auction that would be attended by some of the wealthiest buyers in the world. For a moment, Malik felt like he was dreaming. Was this it? Was this the break he had been waiting for? He immediately contacted Amina, who couldn't contain her excitement when she read the email. "I told you, Malik. I told you the world would see your work." But Malik wasn't so sure. He still had his doubts. The art world had hurt him before. It had crushed his dreams with rejection and mockery. Could he trust this opportunity? Would it be another dead end? He didn't know the answers. But he wasn't about to let fear stop him from taking a chance. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The auction. The day of the auction arrived faster than Malik had anticipated. Amina had helped him prepare for the event, offering her unwavering support as she had done countless times before. Malik, dressed in a simple but elegant suit, walked into the lavish auction house with his head held high, but inside, his nerves were on edge. He was about to see his art placed in front of some of the wealthiest, most powerful people in the world. Would they appreciate it? Or would it be just another item to them, something to be bought and sold like a commodity? As the auction began, Malik's heart raced. His paintings were displayed on large screens, each one more captivating than the last. The bidding started, and to his amazement, his works quickly became the focus of intense interest. The numbers soared higher and higher, each bid more outrageous than the last. And then, one painting, a stormy, chaotic depiction of human struggle, sold for over $3 million. Malik's head spun. He had never imagined this kind of success. For the first time in his life, he realized that his art was truly worth something. It wasn't just worth something, it was worth millions. And the world, finally, was starting to see it. The days following the auction felt like a blur to Malik. He had gone from being a struggling artist to one of the most talked about names in the art world, something he had never imagined happening in his wildest dreams. The auction had been a whirlwind, and now, his art was being displayed in prestigious galleries around the world. Malik couldn't quite wrap his mind around the fact that his works, which had once been dismissed as too raw, too unconventional, were now considered masterpieces. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of his hard work paying off. The rejection, the self-doubt, the countless sleepless nights, everything had led to this moment. His paintings were no longer sitting in his studio, ignored and unappreciated. They were being admired, auctioned, and bought by some of the most influential people in the world. But amidst the excitement, Malik felt a strange unease. The art world had never been kind to him. He had always been on the outside, looking in, dismissed by people like Mr. Jacobs, who had told him his work was too raw for their refined tastes. Now, those same people were praising him. The irony wasn't lost on him. Still, it was hard to ignore the thrill of success. As Malik sat in his studio one evening, sipping his coffee, his phone buzzed with another notification. He picked it up, and his eyes widened when he saw the name at the top of the message, Lena Moore, director of the Greystone Gallery. Malik had heard of Lena Moore before. She was one of the most powerful figures in the art world, a tastemaker with a reputation for discovering untapped talent. The fact that she was reaching out to him felt unreal. He opened the message, his pulse quickening as he read it. Dear Malik, I've been following your work for some time now, and I believe your art could be the centerpiece of our upcoming exhibition. We'd be honored to showcase your paintings at Greystone Gallery. Please let us know if you're interested in this opportunity. I look forward to hearing from you. Malik felt a surge of disbelief and excitement. This was it. This was the kind of recognition he had dreamed of, had worked for, his entire life. He quickly typed a reply, his hands shaking as he composed the message. I would be honored to have my work featured at Greystone Gallery. Please let me know the next steps. As soon as he hit send, Malik's mind started to race. This could be the break he needed, the chance to cement his place in the art world. But another part of him, the part that had spent years fighting for validation, hesitated. Was he ready for this? Was his art ready to be put on such a grand stage? It didn't matter. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to back down now. If Greystone Gallery wanted his work, he was going to give it to them. The meeting with Lena Moore. A few days later, Malik found himself standing in front of the Greystone Gallery, the sleek, glass building towering over him. The gallery was one of the most exclusive in the world, a space where only the best and most established artists were invited to showcase their work. It felt surreal to be there. He walked inside, greeted by the crisp, minimalist interior of the gallery. The walls were lined with the finest contemporary art, everything from abstract paintings to sculptures that seemed to defy the laws of physics. But Malik wasn't here to admire the art. He was here because he had something to prove. Lena Moore was waiting for him in her office, a spacious, modern room with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. She was everything Malik had imagined, poised, confident, and radiating authority. As she stood to greet him, her sharp eyes studied him, taking in his appearance. There was no smile, no warmth in her expression, but there was an intensity that commanded respect. "Malik," Lena said, her voice calm and professional. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." Malik shook her hand, trying to steady his nerves. "The pleasure is mine, Ms. Moore." "Please, call me Lena," she said, gesturing for him to sit. "I've been following your work for quite some time, and I have to admit, I'm impressed by what you've done. You've turned heads, and your auction prices are nothing short of remarkable." Malik's heart swelled with pride, but he kept his composure. "Thank you. It's been a long journey, but I'm glad people are starting to see the value in my work." Lena leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing in thought. "Your work is unconventional. It doesn't follow the usual patterns that most of our collectors are familiar with. But there's a certain rawness to it that I believe people are drawn to. People like new, they like fresh. But," she paused, "there's something else. Something about your work that sets it apart from others." Malik couldn't help but feel a sense of unease creep up his spine. "What do you mean?" Lena tilted her head, studying him. "You're not just an artist, Malik. You're a storyteller. Your art tells a story, not just through what's on the canvas, but through what's behind it. The pain, the struggle, the emotion, it's all there. People are responding to that." Malik's mind raced. He had always thought of his art as an expression of his own emotions, his pain, his joy, his struggles, but he had never thought of it as a story. Yet, in Lena's eyes, it was clear that she saw something deeper, something more significant. She continued, her voice calm and calculated. "That's why I want to offer you an opportunity to showcase your work here at Greystone Gallery. But I need to know that you're serious. That you're committed to pushing the boundaries of what's considered acceptable art." Malik took a deep breath. He had been waiting for this moment for so long, and now that it was here, he knew that this was his chance to truly make his mark on the art world. He wasn't going to let fear or doubt stop him. He had something to say, and he was going to say it, no matter the cost. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. "I've been ready for a long time." Lena's lips curled into a small, approving smile. "Good. I believe you. We'll start working out the details, but I think this could be the beginning of something very big for you, Malik." Malik smiled, but this time it wasn't a smile of uncertainty. It was the smile of someone who had fought for years to be seen and finally felt that he was being recognized. The struggle to find his voice. Despite the recognition and the newfound opportunities, Malik found that his internal struggle was far from over. He had always believed that if he could just get the right people to see his work, he would finally feel validated. But now that he was getting the recognition he had longed for, he realized something: he still wasn't sure who he was as an artist. Was he painting for the world, or was he painting for himself? As preparations for the Greystone Gallery exhibition began, Malik found himself struggling to create new work. The pressure to live up to the expectations of the gallery, the buyers, and the collectors weighed heavily on him. He felt like he was on the edge of something great, but he wasn't sure how to get there. His previous paintings had been raw and unrefined, but now that he was being thrust into the limelight, he wondered if he needed to change. Should he refine his style? Should he try to fit into the mold that the art world seemed to demand? Or should he stay true to himself, even if it meant risking rejection? The questions swirled in his mind, but Malik knew one thing for certain: he wasn't going to let the art world dictate his path. If anything, this success had reminded him of why he started painting in the first place, to tell his story, no matter what. As the days passed, Malik began to find his rhythm again. The doubt, the pressure, the fear, all of it faded into the background as he picked up his brushes once more. This was his journey, and he was going to follow it wherever it led. Malik's exhibition at Greystone Gallery was finally here. The evening had arrived, and the sleek, luxurious space buzzed with energy. The room was alive with conversations, champagne glasses clinking, and the murmurs of art collectors and critics alike. Malik stood at the edge of the room, wearing a sharp suit that felt too tight on his shoulders, his palms sweating despite the cool air conditioning. He felt like a stranger among these elite figures who had spent their entire lives in the world of fine art, but he had worked hard to be here. This was his moment. He looked around, taking in the sight of his work adorning the walls of the gallery. Each painting seemed to pulse with energy, the colors vivid and bold, telling stories of struggle, triumph, and resilience. His soul was laid bare for all to see. But as he studied the faces of the guests, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anxiety creeping up on him. Would they understand what he was trying to say? Would they see the story behind the paint? Lena Moore stood nearby, engaging in a conversation with a well-dressed collector who was clearly admiring one of Malik's pieces. She caught Malik's eye and gave him a reassuring nod, but even that couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in his stomach. The pressure was enormous. He had always felt like an outsider in this world, but now he was here, his work on display, his name being whispered among the most influential people in the industry. And yet, he still couldn't shake the fear that it wasn't enough. That he wasn't enough. Amina found him standing alone by a corner of the gallery, a glass of water in hand. She flashed a bright smile when she saw him, but immediately noticed the tension in his posture. She knew that look. "You're overthinking it, Malik," Amina said gently, her voice calm. "This is what you've worked for. You're here, and your work speaks for itself." Malik gave her a half-smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I know, but it just feels different. I've worked so hard for this, but now that it's here, I'm not sure I'm ready for it." Amina stepped closer, her eyes softening with understanding. "You've been ready for this your entire life. This is just the beginning. You're about to make your mark in the art world, and you've earned every bit of it." Malik let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing a fraction. She was right, of course. He had earned it. He had spent years honing his craft, putting his heart and soul into every painting. The world might not have seen it before, but now it was. A few minutes later, Lena approached them, her elegant demeanor never faltering. "Malik," she said, her eyes shining with approval, "this is just the beginning. You've exceeded all expectations. I've never seen this kind of response to an exhibition before. I think we'll be seeing a lot more of your work in the future." Malik nodded, still processing everything. "Thank you, Lena. I'm just glad people are starting to understand." Lena smiled. "I knew they would. You've got something special, Malik. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The shift in perspective. As the evening continued, the buzz of admiration around Malik's work grew louder. His paintings were no longer just pieces of art on a wall, they were the centerpiece of the event, discussed and debated by some of the most respected names in the industry. His paintings had become conversation starters, with viewers pointing out the raw emotion and intensity in every brushstroke. Malik's anxiety began to subside, replaced by a growing sense of pride. People were actually talking about his work, the real, unfiltered expression of his experience. For the first time, he realized that this success wasn't just about the money or the fame. It was about the recognition of his voice as an artist. His story, his pain, and his triumphs were finally being seen and acknowledged by people who understood. And then, as the night progressed, an unexpected guest walked in. Malik hadn't noticed him at first, but then, the tall man with silver hair and sharp features approached him with a confident stride. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit and exuded an air of authority that immediately caught Malik's attention. "Malik," the man said, his voice smooth and composed. "I'm Charles Morrow. I've been following your work for some time and I must say, I'm impressed. Malik shook the man's hand, slightly taken aback. Thank you, Mr. Morrow. It means a lot to hear that. Morrow smiled, his eyes sharp and calculating. I'm not just impressed, Malik. I think your work has the potential to change the direction of contemporary art. It's bold, it's fresh, and it's raw. There's a place for that in the market. Malik blinked in surprise. Market? Morrow's smile widened. Yes. I'm not just an admirer of your art, I'm also an investor. And I believe your work could fetch prices far beyond what we've seen in this auction. Malik felt his heart skip a beat. This was the kind of conversation he had dreamed of, but hearing it now, in the midst of everything that had already happened, was overwhelming. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything just yet, Morrow interrupted, his tone diplomatic. But I'd like to talk about the possibility of working together. There's a lot of potential here, Malik. And I'd like to help you achieve your fullest potential. Let's sit down and discuss this further. The conversation left Malik feeling more uncertain than before. On the one hand, this was the kind of opportunity most artists could only dream of. A chance to work with one of the most influential art investors in the world. But on the other hand, Malik didn't want to lose control of his voice, his story. He didn't want to become another cog in the machine of commercialized art. The night of the gallery show arrived, and Malik could feel the nervous excitement building in his chest. This wasn't just any show. This was the one that would define his place in the art world. But it wasn't the fame or recognition he was after anymore. It wasn't the critics' approval or the collectors' bids. It was the chance to finally present his truth to the world, to show everyone what he had been working toward all these years. The gallery was packed with people, critics, collectors, artists, and admirers, each of them drawn to the buzz surrounding Malik's return to the scene. As Malik entered the gallery, he felt a mix of pride and anxiety. This was it. This was the moment where everything could either come together or fall apart. But as he made his way through the crowd, he noticed something unexpected. The whispers he had feared were not critical or dismissive. They were filled with awe. People stopped to admire his work, their eyes wide with appreciation. Some even took a step back, as though they needed a moment to process the depth of the emotions captured in his paintings. When they reached his latest piece, the one he had poured his heart and soul into, the reactions were instantaneous. People stood in front of it for minutes, sometimes even longer, simply gazing at the painting, unable to tear their eyes away. Some whispered to one another, others simply stood in stunned silence. Malik could see that they were moved, deeply moved, by what they were witnessing. Amina stood beside him, her face glowing with pride as she watched the reactions. You did it, she said quietly. You stayed true to yourself, and now they're seeing you for who you really are. Malik nodded, his heart swelling with emotion. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He had trusted his instincts, and now, the world was seeing the power of his truth. It wasn't just about being part of the art world anymore. It was about being part of something bigger, something more profound, the universal experience of resilience and the courage to stand tall in the face of hardship. As the night wore on, more and more people came to view the painting, and Malik was flooded with offers. Gallery owners, collectors, and even some well-known art critics sought him out, eager to discuss the piece and offer their congratulations. But Malik felt no urge to entertain them. He had already made his choice. He was no longer concerned with being part of a system that tried to define his worth by numbers or sales. He had found his place, not as a commodity, but as an artist. And that was enough. The new beginning. As the evening drew to a close, Malik found himself standing alone in front of his painting once more. The crowd had thinned, the music had quieted, and the lights had dimmed. But Malik didn't feel the need to leave. He felt at peace, knowing that he had finally created something that was truly his. This was the beginning of something new. Not just for his career, but for himself. He had learned that art wasn't about selling out or fitting into a mold. It wasn't about chasing fame or recognition. It was about telling a story, his story, and allowing it to resonate with others in ways he never imagined. As he stood there, alone with his thoughts, Malik smiled to himself. The journey hadn't been easy, and the road ahead would still be filled with challenges. But for the first time, he knew he was ready. He had found his voice. And nothing, not even the weight of the world, could silence it.